The air in the Obalende community hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop on the cool tiled floor. Usually, this hall was full of loud music for weddings or serious debates during community meetings. But today, the silence was heavy, like a thick blanket. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on Kofi. He sat on a plastic chair in the middle of the room, looking at his expensive sneakers. He had just been rescued. His mother, Mama Bose, was sitting next to him, her eyes red and puffy from days of crying. She was holding his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. The community chief, an old man with kind eyes and a grey beard, stood up to speak. He was holding a microphone. "We thank God our son is home," the chief started, his voice shaking with emotion. "We gathered the money. We paid the ransom. It was hard, but our community is strong." A murmur of agreement went through the crowd. People were wiping tears away. They felt proud that they had saved one of their own. Suddenly, a loud ding echoed through the hall's speakers. It was the sound of a phone connecting to Bluetooth. Everyone looked around, confused. Then, a voice boomed out of the speakers. It was a recording. And the voice belonged to Kofi. "Look, Kwame, I'm telling you, this is the easiest money ever," the recorded voice of Kofi laughed. "These people are so gullible. I'm just chilling at the abandoned warehouse behind the Indomie factory, eating gala and playing games on my phone. My mom is probably crying a river right now. Let them gather the cash. By Friday, I'll be living the soft life." The recording ended with a sharp click. Mama Bose let go of Kofi's hand like it was on fire. She slowly turned to look at her son. The loving look in her eyes had turned into pure shock. The whole room gasped as one. It wasn't a gasp of fear, it was a gasp of disbelief. Kofi finally looked up from his sneakers. His heart felt like it had stopped beating. He looked at the faces of his neighbors, his aunties, the shopkeepers, and the taxi drivers who had all given their hard-earned money to save him. They weren't looking at a victim anymore. They were looking at a liar. Kofi wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. 2 weeks earlier, life in Obalende was normal. It was a busy, modern town where motorbikes zipped past yellow buses, and everyone was always hustling. Everyone, except Kofi. Kofi was 25 years old, healthy and strong, but he was allergic to hard work. While his friends were busy working at the bank, driving Ubers, or running online businesses, Kofi spent his days at the barber shop. He wasn't getting a haircut, he was just using their free Wi-Fi to watch funny videos on TikTok and charging his phone. "Kofi, my boy," his uncle turned, a hardworking builder, would say, wiping cement off his forehead. "Come to the site today. I have work for you. Good pay." Kofi would stretch lazily. "Oh, uncle, my back is aching today. Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. Kofi wanted the soft life, nice clothes, the newest iPhone, and expensive dates at fancy restaurants, but he didn't want the sweat that came with earning it. He owed money to the food vendor, the recharge card seller, and even the barber. The idea came to him on a Tuesday afternoon. He was scrolling through news headlines on his cracked phone screen when he saw a story about a businessman who paid a huge ransom to kidnappers. Kofi's eyes lit up. He didn't see a tragedy, he saw an opportunity. He called his friend Kwame, who was always looking for quick cash schemes. "Kwame, listen," Kofi whispered, looking over his shoulder to make sure the barber wasn't listening. "I have a plan. We are going to be rich." Their plan was simple, modern, and very lazy. They bought 2 cheap burner phones that couldn't be traced. Kofi packed a bag with snacks, a power bank, and a blanket. He told his mother he was going for an overnight job interview in the next city. Instead, he walked 2 miles out of town to an old, half-built sachet water factory that had been abandoned years ago. It was dusty, but dry. That evening, Kwame used one of the burner phones to call Mama Bose. The moment Mama Bose picked up, her world crashed. "We have your son," Kwame said, making his voice sound deep and raspy, like a villain in a movie. "If you want to see him again, you must pay 5 million naira by Friday. Do not call the police, or he is gone." Mama Bo screamed and dropped the phone. The scream brought the neighbors running. Within an hour, the small living room was packed. Mama Bose was on the floor, wailing. "My Kofi. My only son. Where will I get 5 million naira?" she cried. She was a widow who sold roasted plantains by the roadside. She barely made enough to buy food for the week. But Obalende was a community that stuck together. The news spread fast through WhatsApp groups and phone calls. The chief called an emergency meeting. "We cannot leave Mama Bose alone in this," the chief declared. "We must raise the money." What happened next was truly beautiful, though it was based on a terrible lie. People who had almost nothing gave everything. The market women put their daily profits into the collection box. The Okada riders, who drove bikes from dawn till dusk, donated their fuel money. Children emptied their piggy banks, giving up the coins they had saved for sweets. The church put in its entire building fund. Even the people Kofi owed money to, the food vendor and the barber, gave cash. "He is annoying," the barber said, dropping money into the bucket, "but he is still our annoying Kofi. We want him home." The whole town was united by worry and love. They prayed, they fasted, and they counted every naira note, desperate to reach the 5 million mark before the deadline. Meanwhile, Kofi was bored. The abandoned factory was hot during the day and full of mosquitoes at night. He had eaten all his gala sausage rolls on the first day. He spent his time playing offline games on his phone and napping. He felt a little bit guilty when he thought of his mother crying, but the thought of 5 million naira quickly washed the guilt away. He imagined buying a brand new car and driving past his Uncle Town's construction site, honking the horn. On Friday morning, Kwame called Mama Bose again. "Drop the money in the black bag behind the old MTN mast at midnight," he instructed. "Then your son will be released." The community had managed to raise the full amount. 2 brave men delivered the bag. Kwame, hiding in the bushes, picked it up and ran back to the hideout. "We did it!" Kwame cheered, tossing bundles of cash into the air in the dusty factory. "We are rich." They split the money. Kofi took his share and stuffed it deep into his backpack. He waited until the sun came up, dusted off his clothes, and began the long walk back to town to play the part of the relieved victim. As he got closer to Obalende, he saw banners hanging across the street, "Welcome home, Kofi." He felt a surge of triumph. He had fooled them all. He was smarter than everyone. He walked toward the community hall, where he knew everyone would be waiting to celebrate his return. He imagined the food, the praise, the sympathy. He fixed a sad, tired look on his face, ready for his big performance. He pushed open the heavy doors of the hall and stepped inside. The bright lights hit his face. Hundreds of people cheered. His mother ran and threw her arms around him, sobbing with relief. He hugged her back, patting her shoulder gently. "It's okay, Mama. I'm safe now," he lied smoothly. He was led to the chair in the center of the room. He sat down, feeling like a king on a throne. He didn't notice the community youth leader near the sound system, holding a strange phone that had been found near the old MTN mast just hours before, a banner phone that Kwame had accidentally dropped in his excitement. Kofi sat there, soaking in the love and attention he didn't deserve, completely unaware that his own voice was about to betray him to the people who loved him most. The silence in the hall was no longer heavy, it was sharp, like broken glass. The recording of Kofi's laughter seemed to hang in the air, mocking every person who had prayed, fasted, and cried for him. Mama Bose was the first to move. She slowly stood up from her plastic chair. Her legs were shaking, but her face was set like stone. She looked down at Kofi, who was still frozen, staring at the floor. "Kofi," she whispered. Her voice was so quiet, yet in the silent hall, it sounded like a shout. Is it true? Kofi opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wanted to say it was a prank, a mistake, or a misunderstanding. But the phone in the youth leader's hand was still glowing. The evidence was undeniable. Speak to your mother. Uncle Tom roared from the back of the room. He was usually a calm man, but now veins were popping out on his neck. Kofi swallowed hard. Mama. I just wanted to help us. I wanted to start a business. I wanted the soft life for you. By stealing from the people who love you. The question came from Emeka, the youth leader who had played the recording. Emeka walked onto the small stage. He was holding Kofi's backpack, the same backpack Kofi had brought home from his ordeal. Open the bag, Kofi, Emeka commanded. Kofi clutched the bag tied to his chest. No, it's just my dirty clothes. Please, let's go home. Emeka didn't wait. He reached out and tugged the zipper. Kofi tried to pull away, but he was weak with fear. The bag ripped open. Bundles of cash tumbled out. It wasn't neat, clean money like you see in movies. It was dirty, crumpled, and mixed. There were crisp 1,000 naira notes from the businessmen, worn-out 500 naira notes from the taxi drivers, and even piles of 50 and 20 naira notes that the school children had gathered. It was a messy pile of sacrifice. The sight of the money hit the crowd harder than the recording. Mrs. Adelik, the bitter leaf seller, stepped forward. She pointed a shaking finger at a bundle of notes held together by a red rubber band. That is my rent money, she wept. I gave it to save your life, Kofi. I told my landlord to wait so you could leave. Little Chidinma, a 7-year-old girl in a pink dress, tugged on her mother's wrapper. Mommy, is he going to give back the money from my piggy bank? I wanted to buy a bicycle. Kofi looked at the money on the floor. He recognized the red rubber band. He felt a sickness rise in his stomach. For the last 2 weeks, he had only thought about what the money could buy: a Lexus car, new sneakers, expensive cologne. He had never stopped to look at the money and see where it actually came from. He didn't just steal cash, he stole Mrs. Adelik's shelter and Chidinma's bicycle. The sadness in the room shifted into something hotter. Anger. He played us for fools, a taxi driver shouted, stepping forward aggressively. We should beat some sense into him. Yes. Let's teach him a lesson, another voice cried out. The crowd began to surge forward. The warm atmosphere of the welcome party was turning into a dangerous mob. Chairs were knocked over. People were shouting. Kofi shrank back into his chair, covering his head with his hands. He expected blows to start raining down on him. Stop. The command echoed like thunder. The chief stood up. He didn't need a microphone this time. He raised his wooden staff high in the air. The gold rings on his fingers glinted under the fluorescent lights. We are Obalende people, the chief said, his voice stern and commanding. We are not animals. We do not take the law into our hands. The crowd hesitated. They were angry, but they respected the chief. Slowly, they stepped back, leaving a circle of empty space around Kofi and the pile of stolen money. The chief walked over to Kofi. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, which felt much worse. Kofi, the chief said softly. You have broken something that money cannot fix. You broke our trust. A thief steals things, but a betrayer steals hearts. You are a betrayer. Kofi began to sob. I'm sorry, Chief. I'm sorry, Mama. I will return it all. I promise. You will return the money, yes, the chief nodded. But how will you return the tears your mother cried? How will you return the sleep we all lost? The chief turned to the crowd. We will take this money and return it to every person, down to the last kobo. Emeka, pick it up. Emeka and two other young men knelt and began gathering the cash back into the bag. It was a humiliating sight for Kofi, watching his fortune disappear into the hands of the people he had scammed. But the worst was yet to come. Mama Bose had not said a word since the money fell out of the bag. She was standing very still, staring at a spot on the wall. Her face had lost all its color. She looked grey and fragile. Kofi stood up and reached for her. "Mama, please. I'm still your son. We can fix this." He touched her arm. Her skin was cold and clammy. "Mama." Mama Bose slowly turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were glassy, like she was looking through him, not at him. "I have no son," she whispered. "My son was kidnapped. The boy standing here. I do not know him." The words hit Kofi like a physical punch. His knees buckled. Then, Mama Bosa's eyes rolled back in her head. Her legs gave way. She collapsed onto the hard tiled floor with a sickening thud. "Mama!" Kofi screamed, diving to catch her, but he was too late. The hall erupted into chaos again, but this time it was panic. "She's not breathing," a nurse who lived nearby shouted, rushing to her side. "Give her space. Air. Give her air." People pushed Kofi aside as if he were a piece of trash. He was shoved to the edge of the circle, helpless, watching the nurse pump his mother's chest. The woman who had carried him for 9 months, who had sold plantains in the hot sun to send him to school, was lying lifeless because of his greed. The chief stood over Mama Bose, his face grave. He looked up at Kofi, his eyes filled with a terrifying resolve. "If she does not wake up," the chief said, his voice low and dangerous, "then this is no longer a theft, Kofi. It is murder." Just then, the double doors of the hall burst open with a loud bang. Everyone froze. A group of police officers in dark uniforms marched in, their heavy boots clumping on the tiles. They weren't smiling. "We received a tip about a fake kidnapping and extortion," the lead officer barked, holding a pair of handcuffs. "Which one of you is Kofi?" Kofi looked at the police, then at his unconscious mother on the floor. He felt the walls of the community hall closing in on him. He was trapped between the law of the land and the judgment of his people, and for the first time in his lazy life, there was absolutely no escape. The police officer clicked the cold metal handcuffs around Kofi's wrist. The sound was sharp and final. Kofi didn't fight back. His eyes were fixed on the door where 4 strong men were carrying his mother out to a waiting car. "Mama! Please!" Kofi cried out, tears streaming down his face. "Let me go with her." The lead officer shook his head sternly. "You made your choice when you decided to play with people's lives. Now, the law takes its course." As the police car drove Kofi away from Obalende, he looked out the window. He saw the familiar streets, the woman roasting corn, the children playing football, the barber shop where he used to waste his time. It all looked the same, but he knew he was seeing it differently now. He wasn't a part of it anymore. He was an outcast. At the police station, Kofi was thrown into a small holding cell. It wasn't dark or scary, but it was incredibly lonely. The walls were grey, and the floor was hard concrete. There was no comfortable bed, no phone to play games on, and definitely no soft life. To his surprise, someone was already sitting in the corner of the cell, looking miserable. It was Kwame. Kwame looked up, his eyes full of blame. "They tracked the phone, Kofi. The one I dropped. They found me eating at a restaurant an hour ago. This is all your fault." Kofi sat on the floor and buried his head in his knees. "It's not my fault, Kwame. It's our fault. We wanted to harvest where we did not plant." For 3 days, Kofi sat in that cell. The silence was worse than any shouting. He didn't know if his mother was alive or dead. Every time a door opened, his heart hammered in his chest, hoping for news. He had plenty of time to think. He thought about Mrs. Adelik's rent money. He thought about Chidima's piggy bank. He realized that laziness was not just a bad habit, it was a disease that had blinded him to the pain of others. On the fourth day, the heavy metal door creaked open. It wasn't a police officer. It was the chief. The old man walked in slowly, leaning on his staff. He didn't look angry anymore, he just looked tired. "Chief." Kofi scrambled to his feet, grabbing the bars. "My mother. Is she?" The chief looked at Kofi for a long moment before speaking. "She is alive." Kofi let out a breath he felt he had been holding for days. He slumped against the wall, weeping with relief. "Thank God. Thank God. She is alive," the chief continued, his voice firm. "But her heart is weak. The doctors say the shock nearly killed her. She is back home, but she cannot stand by the fire to roast plantains anymore. She is too frail." Kofi's heart sank. His mother's plantain business was her whole life. It was her she fed them. "The police have finished their investigation," the chief said. "Because the money was recovered and returned to the owners, and because the community begged for mercy on your mother's behalf, you will not go to prison for 10 years. But you will not go free, either." Kofi nodded eagerly. "I will do anything. Anything." "Good," the chief said. "You will do community service. You will work for the town of Obalende until you have paid back every ounce of trust you stole. And you will take care of your mother. Since she cannot walk, you must be her hands and feet." The next morning, Kofi was released. He walked back into Obalende, but there were no banners welcoming him this time. No one cheered. People stopped talking when he walked by. They watched him with guarded eyes. His punishment began immediately. At 5 a.m. every morning, while the town was still sleeping, Kofi was awake. He swept the market square, clearing away the trash from the day before. By 7 a.m., he was at the construction site, not watching, but walking. Uncle Tom didn't go easy on him. "Carry those blocks to the second floor, Kofi," he would shout. Kofi's soft hands, which had only ever held a smartphone, blistered and bled. His back, which used to ache from lying in bed too long, now screamed in pain from lifting heavy cement bags. His expensive sneakers were ruined by mud and dust. But Kofi didn't complain. Not once. Every evening, he would take his daily wages, money he had truly earned with his own sweat, and walk to the market. He bought medicine for his mother. He bought fresh vegetables and fish. When he got home, the house was quiet. Mama Bo sat in her armchair, looking out the window. She was alive, but the light in her eyes was dim. She didn't scold Kofi, but she didn't laugh with him either. The truss was broken, and it was taking a long time to fix. One evening, about 6 months later, Kofi was cooking stew in the kitchen. He was tired. His muscles were sore, and he had cement dust in his hair. He brought a plate of food to his mother. "Here, Mama," he said softly. Mama Bose looked at his hands. They were rough, calloused, and scarred. They were the hands of a working man, not a lazy boy. She looked up at his face. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were clear and humble. She took the plate. "Thank you, my son," she said quietly. Then, for the first time in months, a small, faint smile touched her lips. "The stew smells good." That small smile was worth more to Kofi than 5 million naira. Years passed in Obalende. The story of the lazy man who kidnapped himself became a legend. Mothers would tell it to their children when they didn't want to do their homework. "Do you want to end up like Kofi?" they would ask. But the ending of the story changed as time went on. Because Kofi didn't stop working. He eventually started his own small business, selling building materials. He wasn't rich, and he didn't live the soft life. He drove a beat-up truck and wore simple clothes. But when he walked down the street, people greeted him with respect. He had learned the most important lesson of all: the easiest way is often the hardest road, but the hard road leads to peace. One Sunday afternoon, the community hall was full again. It wasn't for a crisis, but for a celebration: Mama Boza's 60th birthday. Kofi stood in the middle of the room, holding the microphone. He wasn't wearing expensive sneakers or lying about a tragedy. He was wearing a simple Ankara suit. He looked at the faces in the crowd: Mrs. Adelik, the taxi drivers, the chief, and his mother, who looked happy and healthy. "I once thought," Kofi said, his voice steady and strong, "that a man is lucky if he gets money without working. But I was wrong." He looked at his mother, who was beaming with pride. "A man is only lucky," Kofi smiled, "if he has a community that gives him a second chance to become a man." The crowd cheered, and this time, the applause was real.